As a fiction writer, something that I'm really good at is starting stories and never finishing them. It's something of a superpower at this point. However, I've never done it 100% intentionally. Today that changes. I'm going to write 100 first lines in 100 minutes. I'm going to try to write 100 first lines in 100 minutes. Why would you do that? Loads of valid reasons. I need the practice. I've always found first lines really hard to write. There's so much to remember. You've got to grab the reader's attention. Introduce characters. Give a sense of the plot. Describe the setting. Ask a question. Be memorable. Exactly. There's loads to think about. It's that thinking that really holds me back. And it's probably the same for a lot of writers. We get stuck in analysis paralysis, trying to write something perfect to get our story started, when really we just need to get moving. But if I only have a minute to write each first line, then I just won't have the luxury for all that thinking. I'll just have to get on with it. Then if I repeat that process, maybe I'll get better at it. If I repeat it 100 times, then I might get really, really good at it. I might. You don't know. For any experiment, you should have a hypothesis, right? Genuinely, is that right? I was an art student. I don't know anything about science. My hypothesis, the stuff I want to find out is this. Can I actually even write 100 first lines in 100 minutes? If I can, will any of them be any good? And will I actually get any better at writing first lines? There's just one problem with all of this, though. Well, there may be a couple of others, but there's a main big one. How am I supposed to come up with 100 first line ideas on the spot? I can't. I'm just not that imaginative. What I need is inspiration and prompts. Just like the story prompt generator on my website that I use for my other series, Prompted, which you should definitely also watch, I've built a first line machine to help me. Every time I hit the next prompt button, it'll give me a prompt for an opening line based on randomized parameters. It might be easy, it might be hard. I have no control over that. As soon as I get my first prompt, the timer will start counting down from 100 minutes to 0. That'll be helpful for me and not at all stress-inducing. I've allowed myself 5 skips, so if I'm totally stuck, I have 5 get-out-of-jail-free cards, which seems reasonable to me. I also have 2 pauses that will allow me to stop the timer, but I can't do any thinking or writing while I'm paused. The reason I've given myself breaks is because, firstly, I anticipate needing a cup of tea halfway through this challenge. British. Then there's a spare pause in there too, because if someone knocks the door or something, I'm not losing time for that. I have a minute per line. That's how it's supposed to work. Will it actually work? Only one way to find out. I'll be passing it off to my future self though, as I'm going to do it tomorrow, so good luck with that, mate. Thanks, mate. Much appreciated. I'm actually a bit more nervous about this than I thought I was going to be. So let me share with you what I'm doing first of all so you can see everything. So here's the first line generator. This is where all my first lines are going to come from. Here's where I'm going to actually type them. We'll do the first one together. That way you can all hold my hand. Actually don't. I need it to type. Okay, here we go. Let the challenge begin. Okay, I can already feel perfectionism hitting me. A mistake with a melancholic tone in the first person. Okay, that's 10 seconds already. Great. Okay. Okay, no, it needs to be melancholic. I've got 10 seconds. Okay, that's kind of melancholic, whatever. I'm calling it that the first one, done. That was a fast minute, onto the next one. Whoa. Hang on a minute. Let's just have a look at that one, shall we? The prompt was a mistake for the plot, melancholic for the tone, remember that, and the POV was first person. What I wrote was, yeah, I knew I'd probably ruined everything the moment I looked up from my food and everyone was staring at me. It appears that what I've done there is transform this line from non-melancholic to melancholic by just adding yeah and probably to it, which is inspired. After using similarly inspirational tricks on the next few lines, I reached 10% of the way through with these absolute winners under my belt, so pause if you want to read them. at your own risk. I ploughed on bravely, coming to the realisation that I've never really tried writing third-person omniscient before, but surely that wouldn't become some kind of serious, ongoing problem over the next hour and a half. Probably not. At this point, the timer was already worrying me. I'm usually quite a clean drafter. I don't tend to write particularly fast, and that was, quite important. Anyway, making mistakes was bothering me. I'm quickly finding out that I'm not having time to correct stuff as I go along, so make of that what you will. Aside from slightly losing my cool when the technical side of things got in the way. Why is everything fucking bold? I did manage to get 10 first lines written though. 10% of the way through. 10% of the way through. In about 11 minutes. If that trend continued, obviously I was going to run out of time. Still, not as far off as I thought I might be. I did, however, start to notice some other problems cropping up at this point. Namely, the fact that I didn't load my prompt generator with enough possibilities. After 10 prompts, I was already noticing things coming up again or multiple times. Some stuff is repeating, and I don't like it. Aside from those few teething problems, though, I was quickly surging through the challenge, and even, if I say so myself, doing some of what I think is my very best writing work. Wow, some of these are bad, but that is... I have a minute. Yeah. No, I remember now. But okay, maybe they weren't the absolute best lines ever, but they were honest attempts, and that's what counts, the integrity of it all. Is it cheating if I refer to previous lines or steal from previous lines? I'm going to say probably. I'm also going to do it. But look, karma still got me anyway, because even with some kind of cheating, I still only managed to produce this gem. 17 is probably my worst yet. Looking back at everything that happened, someone should have figured it out the very night that Julian vanished without a trace. It was in good company though. Here's lines 11 to 20. Are they an improvement over the first 10 lines? Had I warmed up by this point? Well, after 17, it couldn't get any worse though, could it? Oh yeah. Yeah, I topped it, just as I was closing in on 25% of the challenge. New favourite, and by favourite I mean worst, number 22. She had no idea, bless her soul, that the fireplace wasn't in fact giving her instructions for how to save the world. Still, even though I was writing junk, I was actually doing it pretty quickly. I hit line 25 with almost 76 minutes left, so I was a minute ahead. Quarter of the way through, doing okay. The closer I got to 30 lines complete though, the more I started my descent into madness. 27 might be a contender for shittest one. And frantically clutching at the excuse that the prompter kept giving me an arrival. An arrival again. Seriously, this came up probably more than anything else the entire time. There are so many arrivals within these first lines. It seemed like every other line someone was coming. Despite all that, I managed to finish 30 lines and just about keep ahead of the timer. I was pretty much exactly a minute ahead as I finished 30. I was about as consistently 1 minute ahead as arrival was coming up in the prompts. Seriously, 5 times in one set of 10 lines. It was shortly after this that I started to cut some corners, let's say. Number 33 is the shortest one yet. But I think it works. Maybe it works. Yeah, no, it works. It works. Clearly, though, I was firing on all cylinders as I closed in on 40. I feel like we had this prompt already. Exactly. Nope. I had these ones up to this point, which, though extremely similar, are not exactly the same. They do really demonstrate how limited the prompter is, though. You can see all the similarities in my finished lines here from 30 to 40, which I think, personally, are the best or worst yet, possibly, maybe, middle of the road. I've been staring at these for so long at this point. Let's speed this up a bit. 40, too long. Way too long and not very good. Wasted a bunch of time on number 41 that I shouldn't have done. Did we not just do this one? A meeting, hopeful third person. We did. Okay. With one or two more minor bumps in the road. An arrival. That makes a change. It was almost time for a break, which was a good thing, because my concentration was really starting to wane at this point. I just cocked up. I did one of the prompts twice. Did I? Maybe I didn't. Yeah, I think I did. I don't know. Whatever. I ain't got time to think about it. Not sure exactly how I managed that or how the numbers ended up working out, but whatever. I just had to keep moving. And before I knew it, I was coasting into the break and feeling pretty good about myself. Okay, that's 50. I definitely need a break. It's remarkable how your perspective can change sometimes, isn't it? Just in general. Anyway, here's lines 40 to 50. And here's what I thought about my progress so far. For the most part, it's going probably better than I expected. I mean, the quality isn't great. Yeah. No, I'm with you. Same page, yeah. At least I was keeping to time, though. I have 51 minutes left, so I'm 1 minute 23 ahead. Yes. That's genuinely something I was really pleased with up to that point. I had absolutely stayed on time. And I spent the break reflecting on how I hadn't really spent that long deliberating over the lines. The rapid-fire nature of the challenge had cut through my perfectionism pretty well and made me quite productive. There was nothing to do now but dig deep and find the energy and the enthusiasm I needed to tackle the second half of the challenge. Okay, here we go. That's the spirit. 51 ended up being a weird one. It's basically the same prompt as last time. Great, thanks. I don't know if that ended up making it harder or easier, but here's the end result. Number 51. I watched her go, looking back briefly before the trees swallowed her up and the mist covered any last trace. Never mind, we still had a myriad of opportunities ahead of us to write a killer first line. Well, 49. Not sure how many's actually in a myriad. But speaking of things that are so high in volume that you can't even count them, 57 brought us yet another arrival prompt, which almost forced me to do something I really didn't want to do. You know what? No, I was going to skip this, but I won't. I really want to try and not skip anything. Something else to be proud of so far. I hadn't skipped a single prompt. Not one. I've got no joke for this. I'm just happy about it. Unlike something I discovered as I hit the 61st lines mark. Also realising, for good reason, I've never tried to write anything surreal, and I know very little about surrealism as a genre, so everything I'm writing that's surreal is just shit. I just don't really know what surreal means or how to write it, I suppose. Instead, I interpreted it to just mean weird. So, apologies for fans of the genre. I will disappoint you. Luckily, it only came up once in between 50 and 60, so I got away with that. I was pretty confident too it wouldn't come up over and over and over and over and over and over. Just in case things got too boring and comfortable, a new contender for worst line showed up at 61. Terrible. Probably the worst one yet, 61. Oof. Number 61. The Margot family had spent every penny they had on crossing the Atlantic, and now it seems as though they'd shed their lives piece by piece over the side until they were left with nothing but prospects. Wow. Quickly followed by potentially the weirdest line I wrote, which is saying something considering all the surreal lines that I wrote. 62 is weird. I don't know what it's about, but it's kind of funny. Number 62. It's not that I didn't expect it exactly. I did. I mean, I always knew he would try it eventually, or try it again, I should say. I just didn't expect it to be on my birthday and while everyone was there. Things didn't get better by the time I reached 70. Overall, I think you can really see a noticeable decline in quality from this point on. Yeah, it gets worse. Number 65, in particular, I'm looking at you. Number 65. The ground was moving beneath him when his eyes opened. But I was at least on time. Nope. Apparently, I was also a minute behind time now. So I'm not even speaking by this point. I don't think I'm going to make it on the time either. Left in a position like that, with the threat of failing the only part of this whole challenge that I felt I had any control over whatsoever, I did the only thing I could. I phoned it in a bit. Alright, written a couple of really quick ones, hopefully just trying to speed things up a little bit. And by the time I got to 80, I was still a minute behind, but at least I had these gems to show for it. I'd love to put in some funny comments that I made while I was writing at this point, but I'd entirely stopped talking and was just hunched over my keyboard like a prawn, furiously tapping out rubbish. Here's an example of the way that writing coherent lines had become something of an afterthought for me at this point. Number 87. It had taken Roger 15 days to write his big farewell speech to all these terrible people, but none of the attendants that night were more thrilled than he was. What does that even mean? I've no idea what I was getting at here. And I still hadn't caught up on the timer. I wrote these 10 lines as fast as I could. And still, when I started 91, I was a minute out. I had 9 minutes to write 10 first lines. It all came down to this. One final push, one Herculean show of strength, one colossal burst of creativity. Only time would tell if I... Okay, that's the final one. That is 100. I was really building to that, but yeah, never mind. Yeah, I made it. So 100 first lines in 100 minutes. Wow, you really ruined that. Here's how it felt. The second 50 were considerably worse than the first 50. I found it so much harder, probably because I've used a lot of my ideas for those set prompts, because the same things were coming up, the same scenarios were coming up time and time and time again, and I used all my ideas up, so I found I was really scraping the bottom of the barrel. But I was also just really tired, so the quality went down from that. I'm going to reflect on these and come back to you and figure out if I answered those questions that I posed in my hypothesis, in the questions I wanted to ask. Here's those final 10 stories, by the way, before we reflect on the challenge or whatever. Alright, so I spent a couple of days sitting in the dark with an ice pack on my head, waiting for everything to stop overheating. Now it's time to answer those hugely scientific questions that I proposed at the start of this video a mere 7 years ago. Firstly, can I actually even write 100 first lines in 100 minutes? I wrote 100 lines within the timer, and they all pretty much function grammatically as first lines if we look at it objectively. There's maybe one or two in there where grammar is a bit shaky because I was writing quickly and my idea was still in flux as I was typing on some of them. Aside from that, I think they all more or less function. The lines just had to exist, and they do. They surely exist. They are there. I also used 0 skips and only 1 pause, which I'd always planned on using anyway, and I beat the timer by a minute and a half, so 100 lines, 100 minutes, it's yes. I'm calling this one yes. Will any of them actually be good? Well, I mean, writing is subjective, isn't it? So, I mean, to some people, some of them are bound to be. Overall, as a general theme, no, I don't think they're good. I've already shown most of the worst ones. You saw them. In the interests of fairness, though, I will now read the best 3 and put the prompts with them. But remember, I'm saying these are the best of what I wrote. I'm not saying they're good. There's a difference. Number 12. I knew it was always going to happen, but as I stood there, covered in blood, I still didn't know what to say. Number 33. You've done it again, haven't you? Number 73. When I'm on stage, I'm usually just thinking about the song and the lyrics or whatever, but sometimes I think about everything it cost me to get here. Like I said, not good, and in some cases missing punctuation, exactly, but there's something to these ones. I like the voice in each of them. There's a sense of character, and that's what I like. With 33, I just think that one's funny. It also struck me as I was reflecting that these aren't really first lines in some sense. Usually with a first line you have some idea of the story that you're trying to write in most cases. So there's more intention there automatically. In this case, or in the case of this challenge, I was also creating a story at the same time, which I think affected how effective they were. If the prompts had been more detailed, maybe the lines would have been more accurate, but I'd have had way more information to take in, so I doubt I'd have actually hit 100 that way. So overall, they're not that good, but who's really surprised? Will I actually get any better at writing first lines? Okay, so bear with me here, but even though I wrote mostly bad lines, overwhelmingly bad lines, I would say, I do still feel like it helped. I don't know if I'm necessarily any better at writing first lines after doing this, but I feel like I've gained a better idea of how I approach them and where my weaknesses might be, my many weaknesses. So you could say I'm better off for that. I mentioned a couple of dozen times that the prompter was too limited. This word cloud really shows how limited it was and how often omnipotent came up, which gave me quite a lot of difficulties. I think I overthought it a bit, really. And then second person coming up more than first person, that was a real joy too. I also made one of these for the actual lines that I wrote because I'd identified some patterns in my lines as I was writing them. I mentioned mist a few times, ghosts a few times. There were definitely themes, or so I thought. The only discernible theme here is that I really need to stop saying just. It's my crutch word, and I know it is. I've known about it for some time, and I just need to stop saying just. I've just got to quit saying it. I'm finished. No more just. If I was going to do this again, I'd definitely widen the prompts, and I'd add a dialogue option too, because I entirely forgot that you can start a story with dialogue. That would have made things a lot easier on some of the harder prompts. But I'm probably not going to do this again, so. If you want to see all of the prompts and all of the first lines that I wrote, you can. I'll put a link in the description do you really want to read all of those? On a serious note though, although I have joked my way through this entire video, yeah, they were jokes, the whole idea of this was to push past perfectionism and override it to just get started and get moving, and I did that. Whether it ultimately made me a better writer or not is obvious. It did. Nah, who can say, really? But something I do know for sure is that it absolutely didn't make me a worse writer. Oh, shit.